I want to start with a story. So when I used to do research and interviewing people, and once I was interviewing participants in the Philippines, and as you do in the research, you normally will explain to them what is going to happen in the next 60 or 90 minutes and why you are doing this interview and so on. And normally I will finish or end my introduction by saying, do you have any questions for me? And normally the participants will say no. But this Filipino participant will say, yes, I want to know how old you are. Now, I'm not secretive at all about my age, but don't start asking me later. And, but it caught me off guard a bit because it's very not common for people to ask these personal questions in a professional setting, especially you just first met them. But I'm fine to share my age with them because first, I already know his age because from the recruiter, I already know that. So it's only fair I give it to him as well. But most importantly, I know why he asked. Because in the Philippines, it's actually they use different terms to address people who are older and younger than them. So he needs to know how to address me. So it's just an example to show how actually don't make quick judgment and actually to understand why people ask certain questions or behave a certain way. So in the last 17 years, I have been working with clients and companies in different industries, trying to help them to understand and navigate the cultural complexities so that they can grow and build businesses and products that actually resonate better with the local audiences. And one thing that's very obvious to me is that understanding the local culture and the people is actually the make or break of the business in different countries. So, for example, fail to understanding the market and the people they're entering is actually often the reasons that led to a lot of companies, big companies that you know, that have to leave certain market or certain region. For example, Uber have to leave Southeast Asia in 2018, and Walmart couldn't make it work in Germany, and then Starbucks have to leave Australia, or actually not leaving, close 70% of their businesses and stores in Australia, and Sephora in last summer, August, they have to leave South Korea completely. And you have thought South Korea is very big in cosmetic and beauty products and so on, and Sephora should work. But why is it not working? So first of all, Sephora actually went into South Korea with the same customer experience. So they offer like the advisor and in-store advisors to say, oh, do you want this and do you want that and you should use this and that. But actually in South Korean consumers are very advanced in terms of what they need in terms of skincare and makeups and so on. So this is immediately actually create disconnections between what is being offered and what the local wants. And then go into their product offering. So South Korean actually care more about the overall skincare and how they actually overall wellness, holistic wellness, instead of putting makeups and covering stuff on your face. But Sephora actually emphasized a lot more on makeups. And so, but even not just that, even if we talk about makeups, South Koreans actually love the bold and no makeup look, very gentle and neutral. If you think about K-pop idols that you know of, you know what I mean. But Sephora actually focused very much on the vibrant, bold, all kind of like very different skin colors and skin reflection things, makeups. So it doesn't actually align with that. These are just a few examples. There are more examples, more reasons that they actually didn't get it quite right. So that's why it's very important for companies to actually first choose the right market to focus on, to launch, to see whether it's a product market fit, but also to know how to use cultural intelligence to fit into their business propositions, their business strategy and design and so on. So if we then talk about the local adaptations for businesses, we actually go through a few very obvious phases or stages or progressions, if you like. And while we're going through these phases, I would like to invite you to think about where your organization is at the moment in terms of these evolutions. So pre-internet and until 2000s, many of you probably don't remember that, or actually hasn't born yet. So at that point, a lot of companies actually have this one-size-fits-all mentality, where they think it works in our market, mostly like US, for example, it will work in other markets. So no changes, they just delivered and launched, and that's it. And it was fine then, because globalization wasn't a big thing then. Then we go through the next phase. So 2000s onwards to 2010s, in that period, so there's a surface localizations happening. So companies start to think about, localizing, translating our languages. So we want to go to France, we translate into French. And then to China, then translated into Mandarin and so on. And they might change the currency and also date formatting and so on. But that was also quite on the surface level. And it was fine then, right? And then we go through another phase where actually translating is not enough, but then they actually do more like payment method, localizing payment method, and then localizing the social network services and so on. Like in Japan, Line is big thing, and then in South Korea, Kakao Talk. And then in a lot of countries, WhatsApp is being used not just for personal, but also professional as well. But now we are moving towards another phase where actually we need more deeper and cultural adaptations. So it's more looking into how to enhance the experience and also thinking about the cultural psychology and adaptation in terms of not just the culture itself, but also the whole ecosystem of the market. So when we talk about local adaptations, we tend to use the word localizations, right? We are very familiar with that. And for me, actually, I tend to try to avoid the words localizations. I use the word culturalizations. Because localizations, a lot of people actually misinterpreted it as very simple, like the surface adaptations, language, currency, and payment method, and so on. But actually, and also, they are most often, they are one-off changes. So you change the language, that's it, and you stop. But culturalizations is a bit deeper. So you go another level, and it's also continuously changes throughout the time, right? Because you can't know about a culture or countries just once off, and then you make that changes, and that is it. There are a lot of layers towards it, and culture change, people's behavior change because of the environment that they are in, and so on. That's why I actually focus on culturalizations. To give an example, so IKEA, when they before they launch into India, they could do the basic localizations, right? Like changing languages and so on and so on. But what they did is actually they sent a lot of people out and interview and go and visit more than 1,000 houses in different cities and different regions within the countries to understand how people live and observe and understand what they need and so on. So the adaptations they did is actually, for example, they changed the countertops and kitchen countertops. So it's lower, so because most Indian populations are shorter than a lot of Western countries. And also, they changed their product offering based on the living conditions and the needs, and also the price sensitivity mentality as well. And not only that, their cafe, they changed that as well. They have samosas and also vegetarian meatball, which is different from their famous meatball that they have in any cafes. And they actually have 1,000 seats to accommodate and cater for the different needs when Indians, families actually hang out and how they kind of interact with each other. So as you can see, local adaptations and making a business successful in different markets is actually not just on one part of the business. It's actually the whole business. I talk about the whole understanding the ecosystem of a market, but it's also ecosystem of the whole business, right? You think about it's not just marketing or design or development or products, but it's also the pricing, the payment infrastructure, and your propositions and brand positionings and so on. And this means that no matter what roles you're playing in the organizations, you play a big role within that to help your businesses to grow globally. And there's a saying that it takes a whole village to raise a kid. It's actually take the whole team and whole organizations to make a business successful internationally. And with that, cross-cultural data and insights are really important, because otherwise, without all the insights and knowledge and everything, it's hard for you to kind of make a decision. You'll be going blindly to a market and just do what you think is right, or your assumptions or stereotypes that you have as well. So give you another example. So anyone here have used Bumble? You probably don't want to admit. Let me rephrase. Anyone here know of the brand Bumble? Okay, good. So for those who didn't know, there are online dating apps, right? That you swipe, and as compared to other competitors, their brand proposition is woman makes the first move, right? So if you match, you swipe. If you match A and B match, then the woman actually has to reply first or write the first message within 24 hours, and the man can reply after that within 24 hours, and then you can start chatting. If none of them meet that 24 hours, then nothing has happened. So this is their main propositions for years, right? The woman makes the first move. But they're already in Japan, and they wanted to know, how do we grow even more and even better? And is our woman makes the first move actually fit into the cultural elements as well? And where do they fit into the market? So what we work together is help them to understand their brand positioning and also their value propositions, right? You will be surprised how many apps, dating apps, available in Japan. Lots of them. And then you have one is like, I'm here to get married. So like if you're married type, this is the one, no mess around. And then you have other type, is a very other end is like, oh, very casual and like casual thinking, those. And then you have a lot of others in between, where some of them is like more spiritual, like, oh, we are connecting and things like that. And so there are a lot of different ones. So we're looking at how actually Bumble can fit into the whole market ecosystem. And then the value propositions, how does woman makes the first move fit into the culture, and the current culture, not the stereotypical culture value that we believe Japan is. And then marketing as well, how do you speak to the audiences in Japan? And then product features, because they were panicky. And when we look into all these local and international competitors, they have 50 filters in terms of how you want the filters to be. Like some of them is blood type. Some of them is, do you smoke or not smoking? Some of them is, when is your off day, Saturday or Sunday, or mine is Monday and Tuesday. It's not going to work. So lots of those. So we just say, okay, are we going to follow everyone's, just create all these features, or actually not necessary? Some of them are not useful. So we look into those as well, and then help into like pricing and plans models. Like what are the plans that works for them? And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, actually in Japan, women actually didn't have to pay for most of the app for the basic use. And even the dating cafes that is quite popular in Japan, women actually don't have to pay for the drinks either. So there's this concept, how does that fit into their brand, what the company wants to do, and as well as how the market. So you need to find the right balance between the two. And then you have regulations for years that dating websites are actually not allowed to put it into apps, have ads on TV or anywhere else. So we were looking everything, because to be successful in one market is not just one thing. You have to look into every single element in the business. So this is what the business care, right? The ultimate thing. How do we do this? How do we do that? How are we going to do our marketing and strategy and so on? And then for a researcher and products person, they were trying to understand, oh, why and people behave, and what do they care about, what do they say, and so on. So this is kind of typical research process, if you like. But then when it comes to cross-cultural, there's another level. You need to also go back to the back and say, actually, what actually triggering all this mentality and behaviors and value as well? It could be economy and language and so on. So yesterday when I was running my workshop, and we were talking about geopolitical elements as well, as part of the local adaptations or understanding that. And there was questions like, oh, is that culture, or is that more geopolitical issues, or like economy and so on? To me, they are all together, because to understand the market, to be involved in that, you need to know every single details. And do you know actually geographically, the geography of a country actually will inform and impact how successful a country is because of the sources they have, the economy they get. A lot of things actually influence the history and the culture and the value as well. So it's really important to understand those. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a lot of examples here. Hopefully it makes it interesting. So I'm not sure, so if you have been to the Philippines, you probably have seen these sari stores. So it's a corner shops or stores where you can get anything. And if you go to those shops, you can see a lot of products that in sachets. So shampoos and hair conditioners and all this instant coffee and so on. So if you kind of step back and understand why people are actually buying it, it's because of the tingy culture. So people want to buy things in the amounts that they actually need at that point, because they don't want to feel like they're wasting. So you can buy garlic in cloves, or you can buy cooking oil in cups, cigarette in sticks. So you can buy all these small things in a small amount. And when we look at it, why is actually causing that? There are two reasons. Pre-colonial, they have to barter with Chinese traders, and they need to have a small amount to kind of trade small things. And then post-colonial, the economy was harder, cash flow was hard, so they need to be very careful with how they spend money and so on. But now, wealthy people in the Philippines still doing that by buying a lot of sachets rather than buy a big thing. That is because their behavior, they are familiar with that behavior. And you might be online subscriptions or online digital company. You might say, oh, interesting, I go in, oh, so many sachets and so on, and you stop there. But actually, if you step back and understand why and the behavior and so on, you can actually do more. For example, Spotify. We recognize that with Spotify. I work with them. We recognize that, and we say, okay, why is that? And then how does that translate and manifest it into our business? So people don't want to waste, right? Like monthly payment, I pay 1 month, and I'm going to use these few days, but I'm not going to use next week because I'm not around. I'm wasting it. So we come up with a mini plan, so where you have weekly and monthly, so you can pay when you want. So even with that, we kind of say, okay, that's work for Philippines, and then what other markets actually fit into that, even though it's not the teeny culture, but it's because of the economy set up, then we kind of expand that and so on. So this is your example, like sometimes don't take things as it is, but actually think back and understand the reason behind on that. So these are the challenges companies often face. They have choose the right market problem. They need to choose the right market to launch or to further growth. They'll come to me and say, how do I choose that? And is there a good market fit, or does your problem actually solve in a way that it manifested the similar way in the other countries? And even if you know, like I want to launch in the UK from the US, how do I have the good market fit so that it works within that? And then it's to what's next, like scoping, alignment, and then work out what cultural aspect to look into, because it's quite overwhelming, right? What is important culturally for this domain, like health tech, might be different for the cultural aspect that you need to care about if you are in e-commerce, and for example. And then how do you actually gather the cultural intelligence? For example, you need to run research. What kind of research? What kind of data you need? How do you bring data? And then setting up the directions, what does that mean? Give you an example of how do we figure out what cultural aspects are important. So these questions I often get when I'm in conferences. It's like, where do I even start? What do I look into, and so on. So that prompted me to look into how to make things simpler. So I created this cultural activations toolkits where I actually used yesterday for my workshop. So I identified 27 cultural aspects that you can use to actually see what that means to your market and how you kind of look into relevancy to that as well. I can't show you everything here, so if you are interested, go to that website to do that. So, and cultural research is not as simple as partnering with local agencies and say, oh, we just need translator and that is it. This is what I often hear. We're going to get local agency and local translator, and that is enough. there are a lot of complexity. I actually have a lot of stories that I kind of face when I do international research. I was going to share 2 stories, but I'm just going to share one of them. Like, for example, once I was doing work with Ritz-Carlton, like we wanted to talk to really rich people into understanding how they book hotels and so on. We offered to pay them $750 per hour just to come. And then none of them turned up, actually. 80% of them didn't turn out. We called them and they said, inshallah. I just said, oh no, inshallah means no, let's God decide it's not going to come. So, and then we realized because money means nothing to them because they have lots, right? So we said, okay, it's we need to think about other things. So we thought status and feel special is important to them. So what we did, we actually have the general manager of Ritz-Carlton in Qatar, in Doha, saying that we are going to give you, to thank you for the time, we are going to bring you to show you a private tour on our resort, because the resort is actually built like a marble shake, like really elegant shake castles and palace. And we are going to show you places that we don't open to public. And they instantly come. And not only they come, they brought their assistant over because they say, oh, you want to know how I book hotels? And then this is how we do it. He said like that, and then the assistant will do it, and then they will talk to each other. So that is the thing that we won't get if we kind of don't kind of not knowing the nuances. But things like that is incentives, right? How do we even think about incentives that is more than just money in different culture? So this is just some examples that actually we need to think about, and the complexity as well. So in the book, I have a lot of tips on that. I'm not going to go through it, but just a simple examples like when you're scheduling projects, you even have to think about working days. In a lot of countries, actually, working days is Sunday to Thursday. And then you have time zones and also cultural considerations like Ramadan, when it's happened, when should you do research or not. Praying times, like in Indonesia, every country is actually have different praying times, so you need to cater for that so you don't interrupt your interview and so on. So there are a lot of things to think about. And so setting up an efficient process is very important, even with AI partner, right? Our AI partner, John was here, and John was talking about all this. And I do believe there's still a lot of international nuances that you need to cater for when you work do interviews as well, right? Creating survey event. It's not just translation, but then the nitty-gritty words. Someone yesterday saying to cancel in Spanish, in Spain, Spanish is to cancel, right? But then in Argentina or in Latin America, that word is actually to continue. So it's kind of like very different grades. So you need to know what to do with it and so on. So finishing my talk, but the secret about local adaptation, the best local adaptation, is so seamlessly that you didn't even know it exists, right? Because it works so smart. It works like I want it to be, I'm familiar with. But trust me, if you get it wrong, people will know it. Like for example, just take the date formatting. If the date formatting for the UK and US, right? Day, month, year for the UK, and then the other way around, which is month, date, day, year. So imagine you have that wrong, and you book the wrong flights, wrong tickets, and wrong dates and everything. You will know it. You will be frustrated, and you will be telling people not to use it or not going to use that. So with that, I want to leave you saying, if nothing you take on for this, be curious, be open-minded, and just observe, and don't just be thinking like what I do is right, or the other person not doing what I'm doing is wrong, and so on. So do enjoy your global journey and collecting all the fascinating stories and insights and so on, and also good luck in applying them in not just your professional life, but also your personal life. Thank you.